Good afternoon, everyone. So the next session, Dr. S.K. Sharma, who needs no introduction, most eminent endocrinologist of our country. He did his MD and then DM in endocrinology and now heading Galaxy Specialty Center at Jaipur. He is also a regional faculty of Rajasthan for Public Health Foundation of India. He has been awarded by many awards and oration at Vijayawada in 2012 and also at Jodhpur. He has been awarded with Naresh Bhu Oration Award. He has also been awarded with RSSTI 5th Annual Conference 2017 as Distinguished Service Award, and he has to his credit 26 research publication in Index Journal. So I request Dr. S. Sharma to enlighten the House on PCOD.
Good evening, respected chairpersons, dear colleagues. I am thankful to Dr. Meenawat sir for inviting me here. And I will be discussing a very common topic which is seen in our day-to-day practice, whether we are endocrinologist or general physician, that is polycystic ovary syndrome, or what we say PCOS. So it is not called PCOD, it is called PCOS. So the first difference is that most of the time we always label it as PCOD, but it is PCOS syndrome. Okay. So it is one of the very common endocrinopathy of the reproductive age group, and it is having a prevalence of something like 10 to 18%. Etiology of this syndrome is complex. It is having reproductive, metabolic and psychological features, and we see in our day-to-day practice that women are experiencing delayed diagnosis of this PCOS, and the clinical assessment and management is also not up to the mark, and most of our patients are not satisfied with the approach as well as the treatment of PCOS. So with that, if you look here, what is this PCOS beyond the reproductive years? So the things start, even they say, even in utero, but most of the time what we see is in our adolescent population, then in young ladies, then going into perimenopausal and then postmenopausal. So here you find that in the younger age, you have reproductive disorders looking into this aspect, that their patients are having more of reproductive problems in the form of hirsutism, acne, abnormal irregular cycles, and then of course anxiety and depression. Then once the patient progresses in the life cycle, then in usual adult ladies, they are mainly worried about the irregular cycles as well as you can say infertility, because that is the main concern in that age. And then of course even in perimenopausal and postmenopausal, you will find now metabolic disorders are coming in forefront. Patient will be having obesity, hypertension, dyslipidemia, and of course more chances of developing endometrial carcinoma. So the profile is changing as the age is advancing in this lady. So what are the core components of polycystic ovarian syndrome, or you can say polycystic ovary syndrome? Hyperandrogenism is the most important. So you have to have either clinical or biochemical markers of hyperandrogenism. That is the excess androgen effect on the clinical aspect of face, in the form of either hirsutism, acne, or you can say alopecia. So hyperandrogenism is very important, followed by chronic oligo and ovulation. So cycles are irregular, cycles are delayed, or many times there is, you can say, complete amenorrhea in these ladies. And of course, third important component is looking into the ovarian ultrasound, and you find that there is polycystic ovarian morphology. So this morphology is also important, but diagnostic criteria for polycystic ovarian syndrome is changing, and you can see here, right in NIH in 1990, they highlighted that it should be like menstrual irregularities and hyperandrogenism. But in Rotterdam in 2003, there was a big conference for PCOS, and they highlighted that any two defects out of the three, the first is chronic oligoanovulation, that the patient is having either oligoamenorrhea or amenorrhea, or hyperandrogenism, the features of excess androgen, or polycystic ovarian morphology. So any two of them, and you label the patient as having polycystic ovarian syndrome. But now people are arguing that it is the hyperandrogenism which is the most important aspect, and it may be having associated chronic oligoanovulation or polycystic ovarian morphology. But whenever you are diagnosing PCOS, you have to exclude some of the common diseases which may have secondary PCOS in the form of hyperprolactinemia, hypothyroidism, and you have Cushing syndrome, you have congenital adrenal hyperplasia and acromegaly, or sometimes cancers or malignancies of adrenal and ovaries. So here they highlighted 4 phenotype of PCOS. So you may have a patient who is having all the 3 aspects of PCOS, that is ovulation problem, then hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovarian morphology. But you may have, this is phenotype A. You may have phenotype B, where you have only ovulatory dysfunction and hyperandrogenism, and ovarian ultrasound may be absolutely normal. So it never indicates, or you can't exclude, if the presence of normal ovaries will not exclude the presence of polycystic ovarian disease. That is very important to understand, that hyperandrogenism is the most important, followed by irregular cycles, and the third important thing is ovarian morphology, which is polycystic. And then third is, you may have a normal cycles, but the patient is having hyperandrogenism and polycystic ovarian morphology. And the phenotype D is having irregular cycles and polycystic ovarian morphology, but no hyperandrogenism. That is again a important, you can say. So the most classical PCOS are having all the 3 features of abnormal menstrual cycles, hyperandrogenism, and polycystic ovarian morphology. So how to diagnose these patients? So diagnosis is very simple. Most of the time we are looking at the clinical features of these patients. And the first thing is irregular cycles and clinical hyperandrogenism. What is clinical hyperandrogenism? Hirsutism, acne, and alopecia. Okay, so if that is there and you have irregular cycles of that patients, then you can identify that these are the patients of PCOS. The second is, if there are no clinical hyperandrogenism, patient is having no hirsutism, no acne, then you have to look at the biochemical markers of hyperandrogenism. You have to look at androgen levels in that lady. Okay, and the third is, if only irregular cycles or hyperandrogenism, then in adult ladies and above them, you can take the help of polycystic ovarian morphology. But in adolescent, in age group of something like 13 to 60, 18 years of young girls, polycystic ovarian morphology is not characteristic, or you may find them in normal girls. So that is why we don't look and we don't give importance to ultrasound features of these young girls in the age group of something like 13 to 18 years or so. So these are important points to understand. So requirement for the presence of PCOS diagnosis is that clinical or biochemical hyperandrogenism, ovulatory dysfunction, and polycystic ovaries on ultrasound. And now people are arguing that anti-Mullerian hormone, which is now people are having more and more studies, they say that you can either use this AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, or polycystic ovarian morphology. So they are, either of these you should be doing. You should not do both of them, then you will be over-diagnosing polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they say that you have to exclude the causes. When irregular menstrual cycles and hyperandrogenism are present, diagnosis is absolutely simplified, and there is no need of going for polycystic ovarian morphology in ultrasound or anti-Mullerian hormone assessment. So two important things, clinical and you can identify, or you may go for biochemical diagnosis of hyperandrogenism. In adolescent, both hyperandrogenism and ovulatory dysfunction are required, because in these young girls, we can't rely on ovarian morphology, because in normal girls also you will find that there are pictures of polycystic ovarian syndrome there. So that is important, and AMH is not stratified in this group of patients. That's why we have to look at. So here you find the hallmark, the clinical hallmark of hyperandrogenism in the form of hirsutism. There you may go for modified FGS score, Ludwig visual score for the alopecia, and of course you can have clinical examination, very severe acne in these patients. Of course we go for this score, modified Ferriman-Galway score, and here you can identify according to the severity of hirsutism in the 9 areas of the body, and if it is more than 6 or some say 8, then you can label that the patient is having hirsutism. So clinical hyperandrogenism is the most important, is hirsutism. Okay. Next is very significant acne, and alopecia is not that significant. If you have a patient who is having only acne, then it is a, you can say, less important presentation as compared to hirsutism. So that is important to understand. And clinical hyperandrogenism, if you see here symptoms and signs, acne and female pattern hair loss and hirsutism are the important point, but severe acne and hirsutism in adolescent girls are also important. And then of course you can see these acnes which are very, very significant, recurrent, resistant to the treatment, and you say that yes, this is the clinical marker of hyperandrogenism. The other androgen marker is androgenic alopecia. So here the Ludwig classification is there, how the significantly severe and more severe alopecia is occurring. But in adolescent girls, you will rarely find this type of alopecia. It is seen mainly in our advanced age ladies. And biochemical hyperandrogenism, if you don't have clinical hyperandrogenism, then you have to detect this. And here they say that you have to measure patients' androgens, and repeated androgen measurements are not considered here. And in adolescent, you will have a good amount of androgen levels after 12 to 15 years of age. So we sometimes take help of androgen measurement in these girls. But whenever you have high level of androgens, you have to be very careful, because this may be not because of polycystic ovary syndrome, it may be because of ovarian or adrenal neoplasm, it may be Cushing syndrome, it may be ovarian hypertrichosis, which is seen in postmenopausal ladies, and of course you will have iatrogenic causes. The patient is exposed to androgens in the form of some iatrogenic drugs taken, or there are syndrome of insulin resistance, lipodystrophies, etc. And of course, you should be knowing that in insulin resistant syndrome, all these features of hyperandrogenism are increased. So how to distinguish whether you are dealing with a PCO type of hyperandrogenism or other? So rate of development, rapidly developing, probably you are dealing with malignancies, adrenal or ovarian malignancy producing excess amount of androgen, or if it is occurring near the, you can say, menarche, or in age group of something like 16, 18, 20 years of girl and gradually increasing, then probably you are dealing with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So here you find that sudden onset, rapid progression and virilizing sound, clitoromegaly, etc., and deepening of voice, muscular body, probably androgen producing neoplasm are there. And if you are having a peripubertal onset, slow progression, either non-classical congenital adrenal hyperplasia or polycystic ovaries, or sometimes idiopathic hirsutism is there in this patient. But again, as I highlighted, other conditions which are very common like hypothyroidism, like hyperprolactinemia are also to be excluded. So PCOS is a diagnosis of exclusion. You have to exclude the diagnosis. So polycystic ovarian morphology is considered now. Every time you send a girl to the ultrasound people, they will say, yes, there is a polycystic ovary is there. But you have to be careful that what is the method of examination and how they are identifying this PCO morphology. So abdominal, transabdominal or abdominal ultrasound, they say that you should have at least 10 or 12 of these follicles peripherally distributed, and you will have the volume of the ovaries more than 10 ml. But if the patient is married, sexually active, then transvaginal ultrasound is very, very important. And here they say, if you are using the best machines, like you are using 8 Hertz probe, then the number of follicles should be more than 25, some say more than 20. This is important, and of course, volume of the ovaries should be more than 10 ml. So many times our ultrasound colleagues write that it is PCOS, but you have to look carefully in the report what is the number of follicles and what is the volume of the ovaries. So here you find that AMH is also now considered to be equivalent in adult ladies with PCOS. So either you go for ultrasound or you measure AMH. Okay, don't measure the two things together. You will be over-diagnosing. And they say that AMH is not good marker in young adolescent PCOS, and you should know that it should be changing according to the age of the patient and according to the BMI of the patient, and it is suppressed when the patients are given oral contraceptive pills. Another important feature, clinical feature, is insulin resistance, which we see in the form of presence of obesity, acanthosis nigricans, skin tags, and many a times double chain and post, you can say, neck hump is also there. But these three things are very, very common in our most of these young girls who are coming to us with obesity, acanthosis nigricans in the neck or in the axilla, and of course skin tags. So PCOS in adolescent is not uncommon. It is common to the tune of 11 to 16%, and most of the time you have to differentiate young girls suddenly developing cycles, and then they may have some increase in androgen levels. That is not PCOS. You have to distinguish them with the help of a chronic presentation. Hyperandrogenism, irregular cycles are very common for a period of 1 or 2 years after menarche. So any girl who now has a menarche of, let's say, 1 year back or 2 year back, they will be having irregular cycles, but they will not be having hyperandrogenism. So that will exclude polycystic ovarian syndrome. So what are the requirements for an adolescent? You have to go for irregular cycles after 2 or 3 years of menarche and evidence of hyperandrogenism or clinical hyperandrogenism or biochemical hyperandrogenism. These patients may have morphological features of PCOS in ultrasound, but usually we don't go for ultrasound in young girls, because in normal girls, 35 to 50% chances are that they may again show multicystic ovaries, and we may be confused it with polycystic ovary syndrome. Again, these girls are usually having insulin resistance. They may have higher AMH also, but we don't give much importance to AMH in these young girls. And of course, insulin resistant markers may be there. And if you see here, irregular cycles are very, very common in young girls, and you have to be very, very careful in differentiating whether these irregular cycles are within a period of 1 or 2 or 3 years or so. And these are different guidelines which highlighted that in adolescent patients, you should be having both hyperandrogenism and persistent oligoamenorrhea like Endocrine Society guidelines are telling us, and don't look at the polycystic morphology in ultrasound. So these are the menstrual abnormalities which are seen in young girls. So they say that it is very normal to have irregular menses in these young girls after menarche. If the patient is having 1 to 3 years post-menarche, their cycle may be less than 21 or more than 45. If it is having more than 90 days of amenorrhea, then we say that it is significant. And of course, in primary amenorrhea in girls, where the menarche has occurred and they are still not, menarche has not occurred to the age of 15 years, or there is a 3 years of delay where menarche has not occurred after development of the breast, means puberty is completed but the patient has not had cycles, then these are the patients who are having high chances of developing or presenting with PCOS. So here they say that in these young girls, sometimes we don't give a diagnosis of PCOS, but we say at risk of PCOS, because they are in that age group of 1 or 2 or 3 years post-menarche. So we don't label them as PCOS, but we say at risk of PCOS, and when we follow them subsequently, let's say after 6 or 8 years down the line, then again the patient is having same problem, then we say yes, you are suffering from PCOS. Otherwise, risk for PCOS is the terminology now we are using. What are these patients? These are isolated menstrual irregularities, but no hyperandrogenism, or hyperandrogenism and regular menstrual cycles, or hyperandrogenism and menstrual irregularities within these first 1 or 2 years of post-menarche. And hyperandrogenism and menstrual cycles are in the range of less than 21, more than 45, and age after menarche is 1 to 3 years. And the patients who are having metabolic syndrome and menstrual irregularities, we are having a high index of suspicion for polycystic ovarian syndrome, but we don't label it as PCOS. We say risk for PCOS, and we start the treatment. Particularly in this patient, treatment is lifestyle modification. You have to look at their insulin resistance, obesity, dyslipidemia, hypertension, etc. So these are the criteria that if the patient is coming to you just within a year of menarche, you don't label them as PCOS. If they are coming in second year, then look at hyperandrogenism and irregular cycles like more than 90 or less than 21 and more than 45, then you say yes, probably you are dealing with PCOS. And in patients who are having more than 3 years post-menarche and they are having irregular cycles of more than 90 days or cycles menstruation in the days like 21 days, less than 21 days or more than 35 days, or total 8 or less cycles in a year, then you say in the presence of hyperandrogenism, thus probably we are dealing with PCOS. But here ultrasound diagnosis is not required, and we say risk for PCOS. So these are the patients who are young patients, and you have to clear-cut look into their menstrual cycles and hyperandrogenism. Of course, we know that these are the clinical issues which are there in this adolescent PCOS. There is significant hirsutism, there is irregular cycles, and of course biomarkers for PCOS in the form of AMH or other androgens can be done, but we again label them as risk for PCOS. And insulin resistance syndrome and their markers are significantly present in this group of patients. Oligomenorrhea, what are the typical menstrual problem in this? Oligomenorrhea is there, cycles are more than 35, 8 or less than 8 cycles per year, and cycles may be normal, but when you measure their progesterone in the 21st day of cycle, you find that progesterone levels are very low, indicating an ovulation. So that is important, that you have to consider that maybe they are having normal cycles, but these are anovulatory cycles. Okay, so menstrual irregularities begin at menarche and continue for more than 1 year. And consider the diagnosis of PCOS once you are having a lady who is having 3, 4, 5 years down above the menarcheal age or so. Okay, so adolescent PCOS are at increased risk of developing full frank PCOS in the years to come, and they may be having abnormality in the form of not only menstrual irregularities, but hyperandrogenism and infertility, etc. And in post-menopause, these are the ladies who are still having more chances of developing hirsutism and developing endometrial carcinoma. So this is important. And as I discussed you earlier, as the age advances, their hyperandrogenic symptoms may not be that common, but their metabolic syndrome in the form of abdominal obesity, dyslipidemia, hyperglycemia, diabetes, and malignancies are now more common. So metabolic disorders. Psychosocial aspect is to be looked at. These girls are having more chances of anxiety and depression, etc. And again, I will highlight that you have to look at the mimickers. The diagnosis of PCOS is a diagnosis of exclusion. You have to exclude the conditions which are more common, like hypothyroidism, like hyperprolactinemia, like late onset congenital adrenal hyperplasia, rare conditions like androgenic malignancies, ovarian and adrenal malignancies, and sometimes functional, you can say hypothalamic amenorrhea. Girls who are not eating, anorexia nervosa, losing weight, they may also come to you like PCOS, or those who are doing excess amount of, you can say, workout and athletics, etc., and they lose significant amount of weight. Abnormal cycles will be there, hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism will be there, so you have to rule it out there also. And of course, Cushing syndrome and acromegaly is there, which are not that common in your practice. So look at biochemical hyperandrogenism if you are having a patient where clinical hyperandrogenism is not there. No hirsutism or very mild hirsutism, no acne or no alopecia, then you have to look at androgen levels, that is testosterone. In a male, you know testosterone levels are very high, but in female, testosterone levels are very low. So you have to have very good laboratory to measure them. You have to have level whether you are taking full, you can say, total testosterone or free testosterone, or you are measuring testosterone, bioavailable testosterone, or you are having androgen index. So these are the things which are to be free testosterone, bioavailable testosterone, or free androgen index or free testosterone index, where you are measuring this sex hormone binding globulin and total testosterone, and you are having this equation there. So if it is more than 5, we say that androgen index is higher. And other tests are also helpful, like LH and FSH. We know that LH levels are going high, FSH is either normal or low. There is a LH-FSH ratio which is disturbed, more than 2.5 or so. SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, is reduced, and anti-Mullerian hormone is either normal or increase in its amount. So interpretation of these hormonal levels are very important. Mild elevation of testosterone and DHEAs are there in PCOS. If it is very high, probably you are dealing with malignancies of adrenals or ovarian adrenal producing androgen producing malignancies. So exclude the secondary causes also. In patients of PCOS, mild elevation of DHEAs is seen, not very high levels. Again, very high as DHEAs will tell us that you are dealing with adrenal malignancy, and 17-hydroxyprogesterone sometimes we look at to rule out congenital adrenal hyperplasia. What is the etiopathogenesis of PCOS? It is very, very complex. Some say the picture starts as the pituitary or hypothalamus. There is an increase in GnRH pulses. There is an increase in LH, decrease in FSH. Some say the picture starts in the ovaries. Some say the picture is because of the insulin resistance syndrome. So there are different, you can say, concepts. It is very, very complex, that neuroendocrine dysfunction are there, adrenal dysfunctions are there, insulin resistance is there. So you have patients developing obesity, hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, and this high insulin will cause decrease in sex hormone binding globulin, so that free testosterone will be high, and there will be atresia of the ovarian follicles, and there will be increased androgen production from these atretic follicles, and you will have increase in LH and decrease in FSH and increased sympathetic activity. So these are some important things which are there. But whenever you are dealing with a patient, let's say 30 years, 40 years of age, now is the concern for metabolic syndrome. These are the patients who are having obesity, impaired glucose tolerance, dyslipidemia, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or MASLD will be there in these patients, and they are having more chances of developing cardiovascular disease and endothelial dysfunction, and endometrial malignancies are not uncommon in these patients. Insulin resistance is an important component of polycystic ovarian syndrome, but mind it, we never measure insulin to diagnose polycystic ovary syndrome. So don't measure insulin. It is the clinical examination, as we discussed, that the patients are obese, acanthosis nigricans, skin tags, etc. That is helpful, but these are the patients who are going to develop, as the age advances, metabolic disorders, and these are those metabolic disorders which will be coming in the form of either impaired glucose tolerance, diabetes, macrovascular disease, hypertension, dyslipidemia, etc. Once these young girls are now young adult women, their main concern will be irregular cycles and infertility. So they may be coming to gynecologists for these two problems. And of course, adolescent management, we look here, you find that treat the adolescent like risk of PCOS. You don't say PCOS, risk for PCOS, and you start treatment. Lifestyle measurements are there, weight reduction, metabolic monitoring. Oral contraceptive pills are very helpful in these girls to regularize the cycles and to decrease hyperandrogenism. Sometimes we use metformin also, and sometimes we use anti-androgens also in these girls, and dermatological treatment in the form of, you can say, skin ointments, effloridine, and then there are some laser treatments, etc., which is helpful. But in young ladies where their main concern will be infertility, you have to go for ovulation induction with the help of drugs or GnRH or of course IVF, etc. So these are the, according to the patient's main concern, you will be treating these patients accordingly with lifestyle, with oral contraceptives or anti-androgens, etc. But remember this important point, that as the age advances, there are a large number of diseases which these girls or young ladies in the future are going to develop in the form of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes, etc. So these patients are coming to large number of different, you can say, specialists. They may be coming to pediatrician or to gynecologist or endocrinologist or dermatologist, and you have to provide them lifestyle measures. Hirsutism is to be looked at, and anti-androgens are important. Oral contraceptives are very useful in regularizing the you can say, cycles. Sometimes we use these anti-androgens in the form of androgen receptor blockers, spironolactone or cyproterone acetate or flutamide, and 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride. But most commonly used drugs are spironolactone to the tune of 50 to 200 milligram per day, and it is having good response as a anti-androgens. And you find that insulin sensitizers in the form of metformin is also very useful in ladies who are obese, who are having impaired glucose tolerance or diabetes. We are taking help of this metformin, and sometimes metformin is also required in the patients where ovulation induction is to be done, and you have patients who are responding better when you are giving it in addition to clomiphene citrate or letrozole, etc. So dear friends, in the end I will highlight, this is PCOS is a very common condition. It is usually diagnosed late, and we give too much emphasis on ultrasound rather than looking at the clinical aspect of this patient. And of course, if clinical aspects are not there, you have to go for biochemical hyperandrogenism documentation, and treatment depends upon what is the main problem of the patient, whether it is hirsutism or acne or irregular cycles or infertility, etc. And accordingly, it is a, you can say, treatment according to their problem. Thank you very much.